Hello and welcome to the podcast for Ray Church of the Nazarene. I'm Ben Beckner, Senior Pastor, and I'm glad that you have tuned in to listen to our services and sermons. We have reopened our sanctuary and would love to have you join us in person at 410 Blake Street in Ray, Colorado for our Sunday morning worship services that begin at 10:45, if you feel comfortable to do so. We would also invite you to join us live on Facebook, YouTube, or our website if that's a better fit for you at this time. Please visit our website at raynaz.com and our Facebook page for more information regarding our services. It is my prayer that you experience the presence of God during your time with us, whether in person or online. Again, thank you and welcome to our podcast. I just want to welcome you once again and thank you for taking time to spend midweek in this time together. Where some of this has kind of began doing this message in the middle of the week. Week before I did this because we had major audio issues. This week got the audio issues fixed, but we had some streaming issues. So the video and audio was cutting in and out pretty bad. So just wanted to record this quick video, give you a snapshot of what we talked about this last Sunday, and bring you along on this journey together. I know that during this time, it's difficult for many of us to still gather in person, and I just want to thank those that have been able to come and participate in worship. It's been just a great time together. But I also wanted to catch some of you that aren't able to join us online or join us in person and do this quick video for you online together. And just want to thank you for spending a few minutes together. So this week's message was a continuation of what I began last week, this series of Beyond the Norm, where we look at these things that Jesus did, the way that he ministered, the way that he loved, the way that he interacted with people that was beyond anything that was typical. And so I wanted to continue that this week and focus on a passage that you can actually find in Luke, Matthew, and Mark. And I entitled this message, Faith Beyond the Norm. And as we get into that text, I wanted to read you a quick story from Sherlock Holmes and Watson. They go camping. And Sherlock Holmes and Watson, as they're going camping, they pitch their tent under the stars and they go to sleep. And in the middle of the night, Holmes wakes up. Watson, look up at the stars and tell me what you notice. And tell me what you deduce. Watson says, I see millions of stars, and even if a few of those have planets, it's quite likely that there are some planets like Earth, and if there are a few planets like Earth out there, there might also be life. Holmes says, Watson, you idiot. Somebody's stolen our tent. And I like that story because I relate to it in the way that many of us relate to the way that Jesus does his work in ministry throughout the Gospels. And one of these passages that we want to focus on this week comes to us from Luke chapter 9, verses 37 through 43. And I want to read this to you as we begin our time together. It says, the next day when they came down from the mountain, a large crowd met him. A man in the crowd called out, Teacher, I beg you to look at my son, for he is my only child. A spirit seizes him, and he suddenly screams. It throws him into convulsions so that he foams at the mouth. It scarcely ever leaves him and is destroying him. I begged your disciples to drive it out, but they could not. O you unbelieving and perverse generation, Jesus replied, how long shall I stay with you and put up with you? Bring your son here. Even while the boy was coming, the demon threw him to the ground in convulsion. But Jesus rebuked the evil spirit, healed the boy, and gave him back to his father. And they were all amazed at the greatness of God. While everyone was marveling at what Jesus did, he said to his disciples, listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of men. But they did not understand what this meant. It was hidden from them, so they did not grasp it, and they were afraid to ask him about it. So this story is recounted in Luke and Mark and Matthew, and each one of these authors has kind of a different focus that they draw our attention to. And I want to work through those together, and I'm going to try and keep our time together short. But the first thing I noticed, especially here out of Luke, is that Luke draws our attention to the greatness of God. If we are looking at this story and we're kind of put ourselves here, and if we even look at chapters and verses before, this story comes on the heels of some great many events that have taken place where Jesus had fed the 5,000 and Jesus had done these miraculous healings. And what Luke is wanting his readers to understand from this passage is this greatness, this power of God. And so as we looked at this story of Sherlock Holmes and Watson, sometimes we miss these grand events that Jesus does to draw attention to himself, to get us back to realizing that God has this power and this control to be able to do what he says he can do and to draw us into this story. And so people are used to seeing these miraculous wonders and signs, but Luke here is trying to get us to understand that it's this greatness of God that we need to recognize first, that sometimes it's the obvious things that we miss in this events that God is doing in our midst. Our lack of faith is an opportunity for God to display his awesome power at work around us and bring focus back to him. And so, like I said, just like Watson, sometimes we miss these obvious and wondrous works of God around us. So as I said, the same story is found in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And I want to jump over to Matthew chapter 17, verses 4 through 20. And Matthew takes a little bit of a different approach, as you're going to see here. His focus is a little bit different. So Matthew 17, verses 14 through 20. It says this: When they came to the crowd, a man approached Jesus and knelt before him. "Lord, have mercy on my son," he said. "He has seizures and is suffering greatly. He often falls into the fire or into the water. I brought him to your disciples, but they could not heal him." "O unbelieving and perverse generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me." Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of the boy, and he was healed from that moment. Then the disciples came to Jesus in private and asked, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" He replied, "Because you have so little faith. I tell you the truth. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." So here we see that Jesus, and in this encounter here, Matthew is trying to focus our attention, this interaction with the disciples. And the disciples were just really kind of struggling in their faith, struggling with why they couldn't drive this demon out. And it's interesting to note here that even previous to this point, Jesus had taken 3 of his disciples with him, and they had this experience where they've seen the transfiguration of Jesus. And so it's interesting that their response to these events here taking place, it's almost like they forgot what happened. They forgot this powerful expression of God that happened just previous to this. It's also interesting to note here that Jesus had also sent his disciples out to go and do what was asked of them to do here, where they went out and healed and delivered people from demon possession and all kinds of different things. So the question we need to ask is what happens here? And Jesus seems to want to redirect the actions and the intent of the disciples in this passage. A response in faith that is grounded in the realization of the wonder of God aligns our heart back to God's heart. So as we discovered in Luke's account, understanding the power of God and not our own abilities or strength bolsters our faith to do what God is calling us to do. I ran across this article. It's actually an excerpt written by Paul David Tripp out of his book, Awe, Why It Matters to Everything We Think, Say, and Do. And he says this: "You don't have to look very far to see awe problems everywhere around you. Adultery is an awe problem. To the degree that you forget God's glory as the creator of your body and his place as owner of every aspect of your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual personhood, to that degree, it is easier to use the members of your body to get whatever pleasure your heart craves. Debt is an awe problem. When your mind is blown away by the thought that God provides everything you have, that every good gift really does come from him, you are predisposed to be a good steward of the things he has provided. Obsession with a collection of possessions is the result of an awe amnesia that makes you ask of things what you will only ever get from the God of glory, who alone can satisfy your searching heart. Living for power and control is an awe problem. When you live with the rest and peace that comes from keeping the power, authority, and sovereignty of God before your eyes, you don't need to work yourself into control over the people and situations in your life. Gluttony and obesity are awe problems. When you forget the glory of the satisfying grace of the Redeemer, you are susceptible to letting things like food and drink become your temporary replacement messiahs. Fear of man is an awe problem. When I forget that God's glory defines not only him, but who I have become as his child, I look to people to give me meaning, purpose, and identity. The awe war is everywhere. So when we misplace who we are, where we are, what God is doing, when our faith is misplaced, when we are focused on the wrong things, when we miss out on the glory of God, when we forget what he is up to, then we are missing what God is intending to do in this situation. And so here in Matthew, I ask myself, and I'm asking you with me, is there faith without the wonder and awe of God? So we need to make sure that we're focusing in on the right things. The third thing I want to talk about as we look at this same story in Mark chapter 9 is I want to look at the faith in the struggles of life. And so Mark chapter 9, verses 14 through 29. It says this: When they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. "What are you arguing with them about?" he asked. A man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son, who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." "O unbelieving generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground, rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. "It has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." "If you can," said Jesus, "everything is possible for him who believes." Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." When Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the evil spirit. "You deaf and mute spirit," he said, "I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." And if you read the rest of the passage, you'll see that Jesus fulfilled this and healed this boy's son. This passage in particular, I found myself identifying with a lot more. We all have moments and times in our life where we feel like things are just out of control. And as we read through this passage, you just really get the sense and the desperation from this father of Jesus needing Jesus to heal his son. The encounter here is what I want to kind of draw our attention to. Jesus doesn't rebuke this father. He doesn't get angry with him. He's not even really impatient with him. And when we look at this question or these couple of statements that Jesus makes when he says, "O unbelieving generation, how long shall I stay with you?" How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me. I don't think that Jesus is asking and saying those things out of anger and frustration, but maybe some disappointment and maybe some sadness, but definitely with compassion and definitely in love. This father was at a crisis, a faith crisis in his life. And I love this conversation that Jesus has with him. If you can, said Jesus. He catches the statement that the dad makes. If you can heal my son. And Jesus is like, if you can, everything is possible for him who believes. Immediately, the dad had the appropriate response. He says here, immediately the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe. Help me in my unbelief. And I think if I were imagining this situation, I think Jesus, probably at that point, there was a smile that came across his face. And I think for us today, if we're to ask the same question, the same smile would come across Jesus' face as we ask that, because it's a point of sincerity. We are believing that Jesus can. We are coming to this point in our walk and our relationship with God, understanding that he is everything that he says he is. F.B. Myers says, unbelief puts our circumstance between us and God, but faith puts God between us and our circumstances. And we need to get this order right. This father, he was beginning that process. He exhibited faith and trust by bringing his son to Jesus. This encounter helped him to see the limits of his faith and to take steps to put his faith in God and in his power. So today, I don't know where this message may find you. As I shared, I found myself identifying with this dad, because I know that there are times when my faith falters. I know that my faith isn't where it's supposed to be. And Jesus is calling us to this faith that is beyond the norm, to living a life of faith that is beyond the norm. We're used to living in this world around us, being able to do the things that we can do on our own strength and abilities. The American ideal is based on that fact, that if you want something, to go out and get it. The world isn't going to wait for you. And so living this lifestyle of following after Jesus kind of turns that on its head a little bit. It's an invitation to trust Jesus. It's an invitation to do the things and trust God in the things that he says he's going to do. Andrew Murray says this: beware in your prayers, above everything else, of limiting God, not only by unbelief, but by fancying that you know what he can do. Expect unexpected things. Above all that we ask or think, each time before you intercede, be quiet first and worship God in his glory. Think of what he can do and how he delights to hear the prayers of his redeemed people. Think of your place and privilege in Christ and expect great things. Just wanted to this to be a time of encouragement for you here this week. An encouragement to live a life beyond the norm, an encouragement to have faith beyond the norm. And so I pray that you have a blessed week. And if you feel so inclined, maybe in the comments of this video here below, share something that God is moving in your heart, a way that he's asking you to step and trust beyond your belief, beyond what you feel you are capable of doing. So I pray that you have a blessed week, and I'm looking forward to hear your testimonies as we gather together again soon. God bless.